Hello there and welcome to my little arty corner here on YouTube. It is Monday the 29th of April. It's sunny outside, which means until the sun lowers in the sky I'm staying in the shade and keeping cool. It's quite breezy, which is lovely. And it was absolutely delicious when I woke up this morning because it was chilly and there was a breeze blowing through my room, and I slept better last night than I have for a while because of that coolness, I think. So I hope you're having a lovely time, a lovely day wherever you are, that things are going well for you. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to join me as I do a draw along or draw with me video today. Firstly, thank you to everybody who subscribed. I'm very grateful for your support. If you find yourself returning time and time again and enjoying what I create and you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. And of course, thumbs up for my videos are always most welcome. Shows I'm on the right line. Sometimes I do things and I know that they flop, but you've got to try things out. I know they appeal to other people. It is my art, so you're going to get strange things from time to time, more often. So what have I got here? This is a little drawing I did yesterday, and I thought I'd redraw it with you step by step, and because although it looks complex, it's not that complex. Honestly, trust me. And to draw this, I used an 01 fine liner, an 03 fine liner. This is a, is it Pentel or Pilot? Pentel hybrid dual metallic pen, and this one's gold. And this is a Pilot Choose 07 pen, which has white pigment ink in it, which is waterproof when it dries, which is fab. And if I pick this up, you'll be able to see where I've added little bits of that shine. They show up nicely. And I drew this on a squarish piece of paper. It's actually slightly taller than it is wider, but not by much. And I had this space over here and I didn't know what to do with it. And I thought, shall I do a background pattern? I thought, no, let's put almost like some ripped papers on the edge. The colours I used were the Kuretake Gansai Tambi Art Nouveau set, because I'm still working with them, trying them out. Here I've used just single colours in each section. I haven't done any colour blending, except I've faded them towards the middle in each of these sections and towards the tip here. Actually, I did do some colour mixing here with these leaves, with the leaves there, with some yellow. Oh, look at that, I've missed that one out for some detail with black. Find my glasses. Knew I'd forget something. My glasses. God blimey. And let's just pop that in there. And yep, you can draw on the top of this paint and it doesn't affect your pens. You might be able to see here, I think yesterday in my last video I mentioned how I love the the effects water has and the randomness of lines and shapes and shadows and highlights you get. I'm going to have to learn to embrace this, or I am embracing it because I find it fascinating. And I think that's been a lot of my struggle with watercolour, is like marker pens or digital art, I can get perfectly smooth colour gradients. Not so with this. I know there are people who can, but I just don't seem to have the knack for it when it comes to mixing colours and so on, and even, you know, creating a gradient. But if I work with this and create these patterns and accept them as part of the expression of colour in my art, I can work with them, especially so as I absolutely love the colours in this Art Nouveau set. I have to say that. Same with the Inktense pencils. I much prefer these to coloured pencils or many other media. Alcohol markers are a different story. I do like using alcohol markers, but this is the wrong paper for them. So this is a piece of Canson Imagine, and yeah, I've forgotten a ruler. I think I've got this one's in inches. There you are. That'll suit some. It's 3 3/4 inches by 4 1/4, so it is a little bit taller. And if I reach for another ruler, I'll tell you what it is in centimetres. It's well, it's 9.6 centimetres wide, 9.5 really, and 10.5 centimetres tall. And I've drawn pencil lines about 1 centimetre in, and that equates to, let me have a look, just over 1/4 of an inch. So it'd be 3/8 of an inch, I think. So there we go. All right, I've got this here, so I'm going to keep this to one side for my reference. They're not going to be identical, but I'm going to do my best to draw them. Okay, starts at the bottom, not in the middle, but about 1/3 along. It's not critical. And I'm going to start by drawing one of these lovely leaves. So I'm drawing a curve like this, okay? And then I'm going to come back down towards that first loop. I'm going to leave a gap here, and then I'm going to go up here, and then at the end I'm just going to put a little shape of ink on the end to suggest that we've got something that's curled around a bit, and perhaps that this sort of like loops around. And I may actually make this more of a loopy shape. How about that? That actually looks nicer. And then down here I'm just going to extend this as if the stem, it's curled up against the stem, so I'm going to add some ink there just to suggest that's the case. And at the bottom I'm going to create the bottom of this leaf. On the other side I'm going to create another leaf here, so I'm going to draw along this line, and I'm going to draw a big curve back towards the stem, so I'll have the leaf pointing in a different direction. And then I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to curl this up and around to here, and then I'm going to put that teardrop shape on the end. And then I can complete the stem here, there and there. So these are a variation on Muka, the Zentangle pattern Muka, but I quite like leaves that are shaped like this. I do other variations, it has to be said, but I do like these. Okay, so next step, so I've drawn these, you can see they're pretty similar. I think they're shorter, but it doesn't matter, we'll work that one out. So now I've got to start doing this flower bud here. I think it's a flower bud rather than a seed pod. But if you want a seed pod, you can make seed pods. So I'm going to draw an S shape there. So I drew along this side of the leaf before I did it. So I'm going somewhere towards the middle, not quite the middle of the area I've got to draw in. I think I've gone a bit taller, but it'll all work out because we make adjustments as we go. Then I've ordered on the outside, to use a Zentangle term, and I'm going to repeat this gradually straightening these lines out until they actually start to bulge outwards, and with that the lines get shorter as they start to join with the top there, and that's become a bit fatter at the top, and I want a nice point, so I'll just add it. And I'm going to do the same kind of thing on this side, although it's going to be easier to get that bulbous side because it already is quite bulbous on this side. Just going to tidy my lines up there. So that's my first one, and I'm going to make a decision here, which is normally I'd put little blobs of ink on all of these, but I think I'm going to leave them as they are and just see how I feel. I can always come back and add them afterwards. Now I want to add one of these shapes going off over here. So for this one, it's going to show you a different way of drawing these, where I'm going to chart. I've got no idea if chart is even a word. If it's rude in your language, I apologise. I'm going to start over here and I'm going to draw the outline shape in that I want to use. Again, it's these that I'm going to put that little bit of ink in. I can always add some other little bulgy bits, which I'm going to do here. I'm sure bulgy bits aren't a technical term, but they are today. So I'm going to put my central area in, and I'm making them curve slightly differently. So all I need to do now is to complete these curves to complete this kind of bud shape there. And then the other one I want to draw is over here. So by drawing the outside first, I've got more of these spots of ink than I wanted. So this one here, I am going to draw from the centre outwards as well. And I may actually have this one growing a bit like that there. Rather than going down and joining this one, there's a reason for that. And this one will go like that quite happily. So you can see it's similar but different. Yeah? Put them side by side. There we are, it's better. I've got more space horizontally. They're similar but different. And that's fine. You're never going to draw something exactly the same twice unless you trace it, copy it. Okay, now the next step is to put some leaves on these. So I'm going to start here, and the leaves are going to be different to these at the bottom, though if you want to use these, please do. I just chose to do some different leaves. Now then, I'm thinking, should I do the same kind of leaves? I think I can actually, and I think I will. There we go. So we've got a kind of S shape going on here. Come back and around with that little teardrop shape. And then the stem will go down here. I've just noticed that I really do need to add some extra ink here at the bottom just to define those. So that works quite nicely. So I'm going to do the same on this side of this flower bud. Again with that little teardrop shape. And down to there. Add some ink there. I'm going to add ink where these touch the buds. And there's corners. A bit like solder on stained glass windows. So this one here. No idea where they're going to go. I just know that I'm going to add one on this side of the bud and it'll be its own shape. But I quite like that shape that I've got here of the sort of like much curvier bottom there than here. And the way the stem thickens towards the end on these as well. That's quite an elegant stem at the bottom there. And here as well. So I'm going to draw one here like that. It's nice if you do, if I go outwards because I can get that better curve on them, and then follow back down here, and there's the end of my stem there. Some ink there, and there, a little bit there as well. I'm just checking I've added that. So that's all of my buds. They're much more plumptuous than my ones yesterday, but I'm fine with that. That's fine. I haven't got a problem with that at all. I like that. And I quite like the difference in the leaves as well. These seem a bit odd that you've got the same buds but different leaves. Well, you get that on plants, you know, with the age of the leaves and so on. But yeah. Now then, the next step I'm going to do is this here. And it looks complicated, but it's really not. So I'm going to start, and I think I'm going to start here. And I'm going to draw a stem coming up here. And then the top of the stem, I'm going to draw a loop like this. Okay. Then I'm going to, in Zentangle terms, aura it. In my terms, I'm going to nest some. I'm going to nest the shapes. It's nesting. You're nesting the same kind of shapes, like as Russian dolls. Then I can do the same. Next one I'm going to have, I can't see the stem here because this is growing from behind. This stem would connect somewhere below here, but I can do the same thing. Now I'm conscious that I want to make these shapes big enough that if I choose to add colour to them, then I've got enough space there to do it. These are a bit odd actually. I should have had these coming back to a point, but it's fine. So here I'm going to have a bit of a stem for this one. Again, drawing that loop on the end and auraing them. And I think, I'm having a look, may have one that comes here. And goes outside the edge of my pencil border here, like so. And perhaps one that will just, perhaps a smaller one, just down here, like so. So I've got all the leaves going this way. I do need some that go in the other direction, so here we go. Now this one is going to go behind this one. So it's just imagining the shape, and what I tend to do is I pick my pen up, I think about the direction I want to go in with my pen, and I move my pen in that direction, and then I put it down where it comes across. So, and I am going to do probably one or two more. Again, this one's going to overlap here and overlap the buds, so it is a bit different to my other one. I've actually got 7 leaves there. That makes me happy. I'm a simple soul. I like even numbers of them, but I'm thinking perhaps I could have one more that perhaps goes up this way. And then I'll assess, I'll have a good look at this and assess whether there's a space for another one. I think there is. I think I might have one that just appears down here. Again, if you find drawing behind difficult, draw it in pencil first and take it from there, and then you can, you know, either think, oh, I've got to avoid that bit of pencil there, I'll use an eraser just to erase it, and that's fine. So if we compare those, they are different, but they work. Once I've drawn this side in, we may actually find we've either got space for more or not. So I'm going to use, again, it's the 03, and I'm going to draw a line that is deliberately broken and uneven, like so, like torn paper, if you will. Then I'm going to draw kind of border to it. I haven't got as much space in this particular drawing because I've made everything that much bigger. So we're going to have fewer sections here possibly. Or maybe not, because I can actually fudge it a bit. And then like that would be quite nice. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 I've got there. So I'm one missing and one short, but we're not going to fret about that. So I am just going to draw the edges in here. And again, I say this often, I could get a ruler out and draw these perfectly straight, but there's something about that that feels wrong with hand-drawn images to me. So although I could most probably draw along the pencil lines fairly straight, I find if I put a little wobble in now and again, it kind of feels that if I make a mistake or if my pen slips and makes a little wobble like that, then it looks deliberate because I've already deliberately put some in. Funny thing is, when I do this deliberately, most of my lines are pretty good. And as I go back over things, I can see where I've left a bit of ink out or where a bit of touching up needed. And again, my pencil lines, I'm being mindful of where they meet the motifs, the leaves and buds, things that I've already drawn. So I'm making sure that I have this. Now I could try and be clever and draw in a second line border in here, but I quite like it as it is like this. Okay, so I am going to do just a little bit of detail on one of these borders, and it's this outside one, where I'm going to split this up into kinds of little shapes so I can use different colours in this one, and just flat colours, and black, and perhaps even some gold. If you hear any noise in the background, it's a bank holiday here in the UK, which means there's a lot of people not in work. And bank holidays are times when people traditionally in the UK either spend their days shopping if the shops are open, or do it yourselfing, gardening. So there's a lot of noises around with people doing things. But I'm going to persevere. They're not overwhelming. They're irritating to me a little because sudden noises and sudden voices will trigger me into a state of panic or hypervigilance. Not so much now I'm on the antidepressants, but it still can happen. It doesn't stop my body from reacting that way, it just stops me from noticing it so much. And so yeah. I was going to do a video Saturday, but my neighbours were having a good bang fest, and as in banging walls or something, and there was hammering and drilling and all sorts of things going on, and that carried on throughout most of the day. So I just declined to do a video, and by the time I'd calmed down and they'd calmed down, it was just a tad too late for me to consider doing a video, says she who uploaded one yesterday evening that went live at 10 o'clock at night here, the UK time. I'm going to have to try and remember to actually attend my premieres, so if any of you want to, go to the premieres of my videos and want to chat, then we can. Now then, that's as much ink drawing I'm going to do for now. You can see that there's lots of other lines here, but I'm going to add those after I've added colour. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Okay, just 2 ticks. I've got my Kuretake here. I've got my now mucky bit of cloth. These are the, I showed them yesterday, they're absolutely gorgeous. The Gansai Tambi Art Nouveau set. The colours are just me, they really are, and they appeal so much to me in both their softness and their lack of, even when they're saturated, they're not so brightly saturated that I don't like them. So I'm trying to get stuff where I need it, where you won't see my arm so much in front of the camera. The chances are you're going to. But I'll try and move the palette round so you can see which colours I'm using. The green colours I want to use for this leaf are this colour here, which I can't remember what it is. This one's pea green, this one's ivy. I can't remember what that one's called, so let's take the lid off and I can tell you. It's called billiard green, as in the colour of the cloth they put on billiard tables. So I'm going to use this as the darkest colour on these leaves. Just get a bit more water flowing in my brush here. And I do enjoy using a water brush. I've said this before. I love the constant flow of water, and I love the lack of fuss of going back and forth a jar of water, which I'm likely to spill. So just saw my hand go across the camera. All I did there then was I went to the paper here and just cleaned the colour off, because I'm fussy. I do not like transferring colour into my palette from one colour to another. I know other people don't mind it, but I do. Right, and I'm going to have to do some cleanup on this black line. And this is also part of the reason why I haven't coloured in or added all the black ink elsewhere, because I know that these might have an effect on other things. And I'm just tapping my brush here. It might have some colour on it, it may not. Just water, just to get that lovely kind of texture going on. Let me move that out the way so I've got a bit more space here. I'll move the lid out the way as well so that I've got a bit more space. So I've got more space to keep this in view, I think. So we've got that going on here. So I'm going to do the same thing on all of these leaves. While I was having breakfast this morning, well, lunchtime-ish here in the UK, started watching a Harry Potter film. I kid you not. I didn't start, I finished watching it. Netflix released I think it was last Wednesday, it might have been the week before, I can't remember. All the Harry Potter films except for the latest one, The Secrets of Dumbledore, on there. So of course I have to watch them, even though I've watched them so often I'm in them. So I finished watching the first part of number 7, The Deathly Hallows. Yeah. And oddly, I've been able to watch them in chunks. Normally I would be... I'm just going back here where the colour isn't quite so vivid. And I'm not worried that these aren't identical, because in nature they're not going to be. I've got some little water spots on the bottom on the other leaf, so I'm going to add some there. I've got textures going on. And I really enjoy the films. This will sound quite sad, but I live alone, I spend a lot of time alone. And yet when I watch films that are quite familiar to me, it's almost like there's people I know there shelling, because when you get together with friends, I understand. Well, I know this. We talk about old memories, old times, shared times, new times, new memories, new experiences. And it's a bit like those times where you get together, you haven't seen each other for ages, you talk about the old days and things you did together and what you're doing now. And I know it sounds a bit sad, but I quite love it. And the odd thing is I make connections that I hadn't realised before in the story. And something came up today with the Deathly Hallows, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it is now. I thought, oh, darn it, I hadn't made that connection. And it happens every time I watch a film, And if that I've seen many times before, it still happens with all the Star Wars films, for goodness sakes. And books I often read, I like ones I particularly enjoyed. I do like rereading them partly because the characters become so familiar. It's almost like you're sat there with them while you're recounting old times and telling stories of things, which I actually love. I love to hear people's stories. I was with some people a couple of weeks ago, and I was chatting with one lovely lady who had what used to be called St. Vitus's dance, but it's called something's Korea now. Korea, not Korea, the country. I can't remember what the first part of it is. And she ended up in a hospital for children, more or less in isolation, but not in isolation, for over a year. And she was recounting her experience of that. And it was absolutely shocking to think how people were cared for and treated in those times compared to today. And she said, if we didn't eat our food, if we didn't like it, we wouldn't, we wouldn't be given any dessert, and then the food we didn't eat at lunchtime would be presented to us in the evening, and if we didn't eat it then, we didn't get anything. And she said, I hated liver, and on the days liver was served, I'd have nothing to eat, basically, because I just wouldn't eat it. And she's thinking, gosh, I wouldn't do that today, I don't think. No, they wouldn't. Not unless you're somewhere that's quite abusive or controlling, I guess, but that's a whole different story entirely. And it was just so lovely to listen to her talking about that and about other times, because she's lived in the community for a lot longer than I've been in this area, and I've been here most of my life, so she's a fair bit older than me. And the memories of those times, those days, and the experiences she had that I've never had were quite interesting and fascinating. And I did tell her, you really need to write a book about this. Write your memoirs, because these will be memories that die with you. And I think it's, historically it's important for people to know how times have changed, either for the better or the worse. In case it depends on your point of view, I guess. But and the way that things were and how things have changed, but also from your perspective, to have your story heard and other people will resonate with it, and perhaps even in a modern context, in a different context. And she said, well, lots of people have told me this. I said, well, I'm telling you, so get on with it, will you? So most probably that means I have to do the same kind of thing at some point. But that's a different story. So there's those leaves done. Now these ones up here are a bit different. They've got 3 colours on them. The middle bit is a gold green, or green gold, which is, it's the archetypal, it's a colour that I associate so much with Art Nouveau. It's this, I don't know why, but this I would imagine next to those lovely blues in this set, the lovely bright blues would look absolutely stunning, or deeper, darker blues. There's just something about this colour that I love, really do. So I'm trying to put a gradient in here. I've forgotten to erase the pencil lines, haven't I? Oh well, they are what they are. It is what it is. And we'll be fine. Don't forget to erase your pencil lines before you add colour, okay? Unless you're using some kind of colouring where you actually have the colours standing out. Next colour is this pea green. I didn't go to the, not pea green, the ivy. I didn't go to the pea green because it's quite similar in some ways to that yellow, that gold, green gold. I'm just going to put that, and rather than get rid of all this colour elsewhere, and use it in other centres of, or these sections of other leaves, so I can, I couldn't have done that with Inktense because the colour dries quickly enough that it becomes almost immovable. Just pick a little bit up more. Just need a bit more colour there. These really do fade out beautifully to paler versions of themselves. And no, I haven't put an underpainting on here, as in shadows, because I really didn't see the need for it. I'm keeping this fairly simple. And letting some added ink work adds the details and so on. And it's more in keeping, I suppose, with Art Nouveau and so on. Now here I haven't added any water, have I, to add texture or dabbing extra bits of paint in, which I'm going to do, I think. Yeah, can't do that there, but I can do along here, because that's quite light. So let me just go back and add little bits of water around the edges, just to get things moving or texture going on there. I can't ever replicate this. It ends up being what it is, and embracing that and saying, right, I like that. It may not be what you think is the correct thing to do. It may not be what what watercolor artists say you should do, but really, I think rather than, adhering to a set of rules, it's quite fun to explore and to try things and go, actually, I really like that. I like that. This is what I like. Because art is a very, very personal thing to do. I wrote about this on my blog yesterday. It was the art I did for the video I did. I always do a blog to go with the video, or nearly always. And it's where writing slows my mind down, and I'm able to, or I make connections there after a little while away from the artwork. It might be minutes, half an hour or whatever. And things occur to me that may not have occurred to me previously about it. We've got a lot of paint on there. That really is quite a really nice gradient there. Last section with this. You can see I'm working quite quickly because I'm not going to fuss around with this too much. I'm going to let it be with what it's going to be. I said last one, I just noticed this one up here. I expect you lot did as well, and before I did. But I say you lot, and I mean you lovely lot. There we go. So there's some variations in the intensity of the green that's there. I think I do want some more colour on a couple of these though, so I'm just going to add some more of the green in and just fade it out and just get... I don't mind some variation in it, but I don't want it too pale and insipid. So there we go. And then the outside, I'm going to use the same green as the billiard green that I used in these other sections. So let's get that down there. There we go. Take that off and just add some dots of water here and there, which will add some interest and texture. As I keep saying, I do have a habit of repeating myself. So, thinking about lots of things to do with art. Little conversations I've had with a friend in the last day or two, a bit longer ago than yesterday or the day before. Started this process of thinking, especially about my intuitive art and how personal that is. This is quite a personal piece of art, but of course with these I'm doing this in shades of green, but you could consider them as almost like strange flowers if you wanted, or seed pods, and put seeds in the middle. Was it in the style of perk? Zentangle pattern perk, but I've chosen to do them as leaves and foliage because it felt the right thing to do. But of course, when I use my pen, I can turn that in a bit into seeds if I wish. That wouldn't be a big thing or a big problem for me to do. This paper does give me a lot more control over watercolour. I find it a lot easier to work with than on watercolour paper, which is sort of counterintuitive if you think about it, but it seems to work for me. So whichever type of paper you prefer, use that. Right, okay. This one's, try not to get any of that green into the seed pods, flower buds here, because I'm going to, I think I'll use pinks and purples, and the green will mix quite nicely with purple to make a kind of a greyish colour that I actually really like. It's an unusual colour, but I really do like it. But not here. I want to try and keep the colours as pure as I can. So we're getting this done fairly quickly. I'm 40 minutes into the video. We've drawn this. I've nearly finished painting. Well, I say nearly, it's, you know, nearly finished doing these. Am I going to get one of these finished completely in a video? I'm going to, even if it goes well over an hour. How about that? Because I don't do enough of these where I finish what I started. And then I don't finish them because I need to go on to other things and focus on other things. And I know today I've got a particular drawing to do, to finish. There we are. So that, just by using a small number of colours, there's a coherence here. This is the extra colour I added, that green gold here. Actually, I used ivy as well, rather than the pea green, not pea green in these leaves. But because I've used the similar green here in them, it sort of ties them all together. Now then, in these, I am going to use, I'm going to put stripes in. And this is crimson, I think it's just crimson it's called. So I've got lots of paint on my brush, so I'm going to make use of that and fill in a couple of sections. And again, I want it darkest at the bottom, and for these I'm just going to go light towards the top. You know how flower petals sometimes are darker on the bottom? This is what I'm kind of going for here. It's a bit more paint. Perhaps a bit more. For some reason it didn't want to pick it up. There we go, that'll be fine. I can push the colour back down. Which is another way of how you can get that gradient. There we go, that's nice there. Another one. Now I could have chosen to leave these lines here out until I'd actually finished. You know, sort of like coloured the whole section in one colour and then added these contour lines, but I think on the whole this was probably the best way to have done it, to approach it. If I want stripes, which I do. I'm just going to add a bit more colour at the base of this one and this one, probably this one and that one, because they're a lot lighter than the original one. And I'm just going to move this so that we try not to get too many harsh lines going. And just a bit of, this one's very bizarre. This one really doesn't want to go as dark as I want it to. There, that one will work. All that. There we go. There's some texture in these then as well. That'll be fine. Okie dokes. So I'm going to add the same colour to each of these now. I've got no idea whether I've got an odd number of segments in each one. I did not count them, by the way. It's true, I didn't. Not this time. So I'm finding the best way here to get the darker colour at the bottom is to start there but continually push colour back towards it so that the amount of paint on my brush decreases. Trying to fill the edges in as well as I go. This one needs a bit more. Just take the little bit that's left on there. I love the way these can be quite pastel-y as well. They are a really gorgeous set of colours. Pick any up. This paint is not behaving itself for me at all. Okay, let's just put some dots of water on these ones just to create that texture. I've got one more, and this one's doing this colour. And I had a lot of paint there, so I'm just going to dab that off and then a bit darker on the edges. I'm quite happy with that, to be honest, because there we are, I'll add some of that. And then on to the last bud now. Okay. I think this is one of the nicest things about using watercolours like this. Oops, as I put the darkest colour at the tip, that's not a problem because it will get swept back down, is the speed at which I can work with this. Find coloured pencils are quite frustrating, and I can find alcohol markers quite frustrating with picking things up, putting them down. I'm essentially doing that here each time I sort of wipe my brush off and then pick some more colour up and so on. But I can cope with this because the process of adding the colours is still quite a bit faster. Well, blimey. Without counting, I've instinctively got an odd number of these sections on each one here. I'm just going to go and put some water in places. I think particularly where I want highlights. I think that would actually work best. The lovely thing about these as well, you can't do this with Inktense pencils once they've dried, because once they've dried they're permanent. So there we are, there's that. Now then, you can see on my original version here I've used different colours in combination, but I'm going to stick to the same one. This pink though is in that section there, so I'm going to fill these ones in with that pink while I'm at it, and that'll give them a chance to dry. Picking quite a bit of paint up. Because it will just blend out to practically nothing. That's why I love this so much. I found a set of paints I really like, so I think I may need the rest of the set in the Kuretake Tambi. So what I've done here in the lighter area, I've actually put little dots of darker colour there instead of just water. Okay, and we'll get this little section here because that would equate to this section. So I do want it to look like I've got things overlapping. These shapes remind me of an experiment I did most probably last summer where I was playing with torn paper and so on and seeing how I could get interesting patterns, you know, collages to draw on and write on and so on. And now I'm doing it in drawing. So I guess it's taken its own sweet time to kind of work its way through. Now as I dot with water here, I'm starting to pick up paint and I'm able to bring that colour, the darker colour up here. So I've got reverse speckles, as it were, which is quite nice. Okay, so for these, I think I'm going to go with this, I can't remember what colour it is, but it's a mauve colour, a purpley colour. And I think that will be quite a nice contrast. I think the one next door is just that little bit too similar for my likings for this. I do need to pick some of this paint up because I had just a bit too much on my brush. So let's have a look. I might have enough here to mostly do a section, possibly. Just need a little bit more at the base. Just dab and dot that in, the extra colour, as it'll add to that texture then. Oh, I didn't pick any up. Still haven't particularly. What am I doing here? So that kind of works. Might just pick some of that up for here as well. And perhaps some dots up here. Again. Just adding some water down the bottom so that we have some interesting stuff going on. I didn't have enough water flowing in my brush to be able to pick enough paint up. Forget sometimes to squeeze it to keep the water flowing in the way I'd like it to flow. There's some water going in there, but it'll be fine. Okay. Alright, one more on this one. We're getting there, we're nearly done. The painting. Now I could cut this out, but I've got a feeling that people would say don't. Of course, you can always put this on fast forward and skip ahead if you wish. I do love these dusky colours. Have I found the perfect palette for me, colour palette? Possibly for me as I am at my time of life here and now, possibly. I just hope they don't stop making them. I suspect these will last for a long time. Even though the pans look very big, they're not very deep with paint. They're designed for the use of big brushes. They're Japanese watercolour paints. So they are different to the Western paints that we have. They've got a different binding agent and they feel different. But there's something about the feel of them, the way they seem to work, that appeals to me far more, I think, than Western watercolours, which is a surprise. So I did have a set of the Gansai Tambi many years ago and I didn't get on with them. But it may have been that the colours just weren't to my liking. And I know you can buy the colours open source, I think, as in you can just buy the pans you need when you run out of a colour, which is really great because, you know, there's going to be colours I'm likely to use more than others and some I may hardly ever use. But I may look at the other sets and see which colours would be perhaps of use to me. Right, time for the dots of water and spreading of a slightly darker colour. That one there does need a bit more colour there, as does that one. So let's just take some of the colour up, water. Almost instantly reactivates with water. It doesn't cling to the paper, which makes me happy. I know would make it difficult if I wanted to layer colours, but I don't want to layer colours. It's not my way of working generally. If I want to layer colours, I'm likely to use something like Inktense as an underpainting, as it were. Because these are translucent enough that if I use a darker colour or a different colour, it will show through and mix with these. But I'd only do that most probably if I wanted shading. in a more intense way than I can achieve with colours on their own. And I quite like the subtlety here. I know there's going to be some people, or some of you, who like high contrast shading, and I do in the right circumstances or with the right media. But I also like this, where there is that subtlety, where it reminds me of Art Nouveau and art and crafts. It's making me think I may at some point have to have a delve into the world of gouache. Maybe. Not sure. I think I most probably could do with gouache what I achieve with, I can most probably do what you could achieve with gouache digitally, to be honest. And a lot easier for me. And there we go. So that's my pods done. Now these little dots and things, I've got an opportunity here where I could bring them out with lines or with white, and I may do that. I've got a couple here left to do, so this section here I'm going to do in that green gold, because oh no, I'll do it in saffron yellow. Because it's such a beautiful colour, this one. No, I'm going to add green gold to it. So I do want it a little bit darker, because that yellow is just a bit too bright compared to the rest. So I'm going to have to remember that on the other end I add some saffron yellow as I fade this out to practically nothing there. So let's start with some of the saffron yellow, which is actually a very beautiful yellow. It's very golden and sunshiny and lovely. But this green gold I want, because I've used it elsewhere in the design. Just as I used that lovely dusty pink colour here, or the crimson it was, wasn't it? So I'm just going to add a bit more of the green gold there, because it's, and I'm going to add some more at this end as well, because it's not as dark as perhaps I'd like it at the edge. But I can then make sure that all of this has some of this colour on it. A little bit more up just to put in the middle and just blend it out. Like so, and again I'm just going to go back while this is still damp and squeeze my brush so water comes out, and just add some spots of water here to add that texture, and perhaps pick up a little bit of the colour just to add some texture here as well. As it works. So that's quite interesting. And then the last colour I'm going to put here, I'm going to use that billiard green, I think. Because I could use one of the other greens, but I think that difference in colour here, this darker green, would be quite nice. In my original one I had another section here and I used the purpley colour, but I'm going to put this next door. I'm going to push it back as much as I can. As I bash myself here, move things around awkwardly. Just wet this and get this all speckledy and, you know, what it needs to be here. Same there. Tiny hints of colour there. Perhaps I need a little bit more colour though, which isn't a problem because we can always do that. Like that. And then very last section here, and I'm almost at an hour, so we've done that. So, oh no, I've got to do the little bits on the edge. Oh gosh, look at that, what a numpty. Got plenty of paint there. Okay, let's activate this and move it away from here, is it? Get this clean so I can, that's better. What a numpty. So I'm just going to add perhaps some dots of darker colours here and hope they'll spread out. What I'll do is I'll just add some water, and the same here. Paper's curled with the damp, but that's fine because it will flatten out if you put it under a book or you just go. This one along the edge, I did use the greens to fill these in. So I'll go back with a billiard green and I'm going to fill these in with quite intense colours. And I'm not doing them every so many, I'm going to do it quite randomly. Just where I think the colours would fit in. Seems this dark colour, I'm going for the biggest blocks, to be honest. So, let's have a look. Obviously there's not so many big blocks in places, but we can get that lovely dark green in. Trying to fill it completely and up to the corners. And we're going to get some variation in colours as well, because that's how this stuff works today. I don't want any paper showing through if I can help it. Not that it matters too much. Okay, I'm going to use that ivy green next. And just put some in here and there where I think it would fit in. Actually, I'm not really thinking about it, I'm just doing it because that's how this works. I'm not looking for a repeating pattern as such. The pattern or the thing that ties this together is using the same colours, and I'm using that pea green that I used in those big leaves, the Mucaresque leaves. Some of these I'm leaving white because once this is completely dried, I'm going to add black to those blocks. And that then is everything done with my watercolour. So I can put those away. Put the plastic topping on them because that stops them falling about in the box. Lid on, that over there, that there. So that is now all the paint's done. So if I put this side by side with the one I've already completed, you can see we've got some stuff to do. Patterns on these sections to make them interesting, to add texture, and then some on here. And well, I haven't got these leaves to do anything with, but we've got white dots and gold dots then to add. Now, for these details, I am going to use an 01 pen, and I'm going to move my paper so my hand's away from these dark, or you know, the wet areas rather, and I'm just going to simply draw lines to connect this central part with the outer part through that middle green bit, so it adds some interest and texture. Very simple, but I think it actually works quite nicely. Sometimes it's simple things. And all it does is it adds a bit of darkness to this. And you could curve the lines to give a feeling of volume. You certainly could do a, like, you know, alternate black, not, you know, black filled in, not filled in, and so on along there, and that would work as well. Just depends how contrasting, how much visual drama that you want in this section. And I may come back and do that. If I thought I could have left this blank and done black and white sections, which would be really dramatic. But I could also do that because I have a white gel pen that is opaque and doesn't really pick these colours up, which is even better. It just takes a little while, not too long to do. And I'm not being too fussy about keeping exactly the same distance between them, though if there's an obvious big gap, I'll go back and add a line just to split it up. And I'm not being fussy about getting the lines to connect the line above and the line below them, as it were, because it's such a tiny space. I had a sort of like a thought this morning. Shocking, I know, a thought. And I realised that I make some really bizarre sizes of art, which means that they can be awkward to frame. So I've bought a set of photo or picture mounts, the mat boards, not the picture frames, so that I can cut paper to the exact size I need, and then the hole in the middle I can actually use as a guide for, well, exactly where the artwork needs to go and the size of it, or at least the size of it. You know, you don't need the picture as big as the paper as big as the mat. And I thought, brilliant, why hadn't I thought of that before? It's because I'm numpty. So, and they weren't that expensive, and there's something that can remain in my stock. So maybe I can make use of them if I decide to sell my artwork as well. Well, I do want to, but it's thinking ahead now too, because it will cost a lot to ship framed artwork, and you've got the danger then, if somebody wants glass in the frame, of it breaking and damaging in transit. There's always that worry with artwork that could happen anyway, but you know, it is what it is. Okay, so this one here, in my original one here, I used Shattuck, but I think I'll do something different in the pink sections. And I think I'm going to do can you guess what? We're going to do some diva dance here, because I think that will work nicely. It'll give you enough dramatic contrast. I won't cover up all of this lovely texture that's there. It'll still poke through a bit, and I'm looking at where I can add the humps, not based on the shape of the line, but on where I can avoid some of this lovely light and dark splotches and blobs. And that, I think, can go a little bit bigger. Nice. I think, yeah, there's this section here, it's got some lovely texture in it, and such a shame to cover it up, but well, you know, needs must. But I think it will still show through to some degree or another, which makes me happy to think of that. This is the hardest thing to do, is when you've got something you like, to go back and go, oh, no, I've got to do something with it. I was actually going to do a different pattern here, but I thought that might actually look, oh, that looks good. It does, it looks good. And I do want a lumpy bump at the bottom there. So perhaps here I'll start with the bottoms and work my way up to the top. This also means I'm glad I'm using a fine pen, because a thicker pen would just take up too much of this. And would obliterate too much of the background. If anything, I could have done with a finer pen. I'm sure I must have some in my stash somewhere. But, you know, add some blackness here, just to that bit. I haven't done a very good job of colouring in bits in black. So we've got that there, so that's interesting. I don't know what you think. This one I'm going to take the approach of, I'm going to draw random shaped kinds of boxes in here. Rounded corners. If I need to go back and add some black to fill them in, I will. I like this kind of thing. So you can see they're not all square. This one has got a strange angle on it. And it just looks like we've got random blocks of stone, I suppose, put together. But I kind of like it because it allows the colour and the texture beneath to show through, which is perhaps I should have done in the pink, but it's all good. It all works out in the end. So not far off done there. In fact, I think I prefer this to the DeviantArt in many ways because of the openness of it, but it's nice to have that kind of contrast as well. And I think for this last section, I may just trying to think what I want to do there. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use vertical lines like so. I was tempted to do doodah, but it doesn't allow me the options to spread lines out, and you know, there's too many lines too close together. Whereas this way I can pick and choose where I put lines, and I don't want them to to connect with the lines of this pattern above, if you know what I mean. I want them to appear staggered, so and I can angle them still as well as I wish. And in places I can actually get two into the same box. Well, we've got nice big ones. I'm not going to bother there because that would be a silly little space, but here perhaps. There we go. I'm choosing to add a little bit of ink at the bottom. Part of me is thinking you don't need to do that one here, Angela, but I did. I've got one here that doesn't have a line connecting, so perhaps I need at least one line for each section. Like so. And so we've got that interesting edge to this here. I do want to add my initials. So I've just put a little dangly bit there. And I'm going to sign this. And I'm doing this before I do anything else, because the next step is white dots and then gold. So let's have a look. Do I want to add white to any of these sections? I'm going to add some white dots along these bits of the DeviantArt. I like this. It adds almost like little pearls in them. It does kind of break up the contrast a bit, but I like the extra texture it adds. And a couple there, which is quite nice. It's got little things peeking out. There's that hint of jewels or gems below. I could add white to these in some way, and perhaps I will by adding little squares inside these, or little blobs in different places, almost like they're cells in a plant, because plant cells have blocky cells. Animal cells are particularly rounded and soft looking. Plants not so much. They're not really going to show up too well on the paler sections, which is fine, but they will be noticeable if somebody has a good look or tilt the paper. So it's a very subtle detail, but one that I think is quite effective. That yellow green I just love as it is, so I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, in these I'm going to put some white dots in where there would be highlighted regions, which oddly they coincide with the whiter dots here. I'm trying to say coincide and my brain was trying to say coincidentally. Oh dear goodness. Art and talk. It's possible. Maybe not too coherently at times, but you know, I know you'll forgive me because you're such a lovely bunch of people, and I mean that truthfully. You are. There we go. And I'm not going to do any white in the others. I'm going to leave them as they are. Gold. This colour here begs out for some gold dots. So I'm going to put them getting, you know, start with a large one at the top and get smaller towards the bottom. This may need a bit of a, let's get you working on the back of my hands. Oddly, the skin on your back of your hand is great for getting jelly roll or rollerball pens to work if they're being a bit stubborn, or to clean them off on. I've left some white areas here that I can put some gold in. Now these hybrid dual metallic pens have two different colours. They appear different on black than they do on white. So I'm going to put some gold on top of the black squares as well, and that will give me a different appearance in the gold. I don't know if you can see that. Missed one out there, and another one beside it there. Well, not quite beside it, but you know what I mean, a bit further along. And they do look a bit different. To my eyes, they do. And perhaps I could, I'm thinking about putting a dot of gold in those. No, I'm going to behave myself. And the very last thing I want to do is I'm going to add some gold dots around this plant. Almost like we've got pollen or sparkles coming from these in some way or another. And it just brings all of this together where I've used the same colours together, as it were, the same things right the way across. And that, I think, will do it. Actually, perhaps. Perhaps another couple down here. A bit more than I would normally. I'm looking up at the screen to see what I'd like to do here and see if there's a kind of balance to it. So that's today's. This is yesterday's. I'll just flatten it out as well. And I'll scan these in so we get a nice image for the well, the one I've done today I'll scan in, which is this one. Don't know which one you prefer. I like them both, but there's something about this one and less black in this section that appeals to me. It does. And I do like the texture I've achieved with water and paint in the coloured areas as well. Now I could have put a coloured background in, but I chose not to because I know that with paint I'm a nightmare. It's true. In big areas. So I've left it that way. In future, I may consider using distress inks because I know distress inks react with water and they disappear through. Actually, there's one thing I haven't done here. You can see this little channel up here. I actually left that for gold. For a line of gold. A vein of gold running through, a thread of gold. Just like that. Don't know how well this is going to scan in. I mean, you know, glitter and sparkly stuff scanning and photographing can be a nightmare. Actually, scanning and photographing for me can be a nightmare. I'm better at scanning things in. There we go. That little texture of luxury there. I think you'll agree. And again, I'll just pick it up and turn it in the light so you can see. Don't really see that. It just appears dark when the light's not catching it, but from different angles, that shine comes out and adds interest. So that's something for me to think about, going back to the distress inks and using those later on. So I'm going to say thank you for joining me. 1 hour and 21 minutes. And I've completed a drawing and coloured it in and added all the fiddly bits. And the only thing I regret not doing is using distress inks for the background before I started. Next time. Or maybe I'll do a version of it with the distress ink background, and while the video's uploading, processing and stuff, and I'll upload it to the community section, and I'll put a link in the description below. So thank you for joining me. I hope you have fun drawing this with me and making it your own as well. And I look forward to our next video together, our next hour or so together. So until then, look after yourselves, take time, and above all else, find time to be creative. Ta-ta for now. Bye.